And none of them are visitors either. I like it. Four song leaders is part of it. That's good. We thank Jim for his being with us today. That's a good thing. We're glad to see him. Y'all heard anything about Connie Lee? Earlier this week, Troy said that she got to come home, but I have not heard anything since then. But we're glad that she's home. Still has a ways to go. Still got some treatments to go. But we're glad she got to come home. We're glad Jimmy and Jean are back with us. They were out gallivanting around last week, and we're glad that they are back with us. And we hope you had a good time. It's good to get away and have a good time sometimes. That's good. You know, as we look for things to, and I'm going to get my pen out here, if that's all right. To talk about is usually we end up preaching to ourselves, and that's just part of it. As you think, what do we need to hear, and usually it comes back on, what do I kind of need to hear? Where am I falling short? Where do I need to have something? And if that's, I hope that maybe it'll be beneficial to us all. But sometimes we do preach to ourselves. And as I was getting ready for a lesson this week, I was thinking about how much, as a society, we like to be self-righteous. That we like to be able to look and see, I'm right and they're wrong. Aren't I righteous because of that? And I know we know that's not the way to be, but we do it. It's a tendency that we all have, and I have it. And it's not good. When you think about our news media, and I know I pick on them a lot, but they deserve it, is that's one of their basic principles, is that we want to make that other side, whatever side that may be, whether it's political or whether it's sports-wise or whatever it is, the other side is wrong, I'm persecuted, and I need to feel self-righteous about it. And it obviously sells very well because our news media does it all the time. They want us to be mad at the other side and to feel self-righteous for ourselves. That's something that we like. And I got to tell you that I found myself in that situation. This was actually after I started thinking about this lesson, as I had a lady was on the stand this week, and the question came up, tell us about your work history. And it was like, well, of course, during COVID, I didn't work because the government was giving us money. And of course, you know, that just made me very self-righteously indignant. But then you hear more about her story, and you realize that she had lots of problems. And maybe that was a different situation than you initially think. But I was looking at myself and how I was so quick to judge that she was taking advantage of the situation, and how I like to feel self-righteous there. That maybe I was feeling in a way that wasn't very Christ-like. And I think about, that Christ talked a lot about religious leaders who felt like they were better than everybody else. He spent a lot of time on that. And he talked, and we usually think of the Pharisees and the lawyers, and they're the ones that did a lot. But he talked a lot about people who were self-righteous, people who got indignant about other people. When we hear something happening, you hear about some megachurch pastor, preacher, and he gets in trouble for some sort of scandal. It happens all the time. What's the first thing you look for? Well, who's he associated with? And if it's a Baptist preacher, okay, that's all right. Then you feel so self-righteous. Or maybe, it's a Catholic priest, and you'll, whew. But then if it's a Church of Christ guy, you feel so bad. And it's not about what their religion is. They're all human. All of them are. And it can happen to anybody. I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm not. But it is such a temptation to think that, man, I am so glad that I'm not like those other guys. And I want to look at a time in the book of Luke, chapter 17, where Jesus addresses this directly. And we're going to it's in 18. Luke 18, verse 9. This is what we call the Pharisee and the tax collector. And Jesus is talking to the crowd. He's talking to his disciples. And he gives them a parable. He also told this parable to some who trusted themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. And that one verse there Let's read that again, verse 9. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. But that tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying to God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. You know, when I read this passage, and we're not arguing on the passage, are we? We can see that Pharisee is wrong, isn't he? But when we think about it, it's like, I'm glad I'm not that Pharisee. Aren't we just like him when he says, I'm glad I'm not like that tax collector? As soon as we put that, our position to say, I am so much better than he is, we become just like him. And that's the temptation. We look at this and we see, it's easy to say, that tax collector went down justified. And it's easy to look at that Pharisee and say, he was wrong. But as soon as we say, I'm glad I'm not like that Pharisee, we are just like him. And I find myself in that position sometimes. I find myself thinking, I'm glad I'm not like those people. And when I do, I just what Jesus was warning against right there. That we want to be careful in how we get so indignant and self-righteous, because Jesus preaches against it. When we see that passage, and we see that tax collector down on his knees, asking for forgiveness, it reminds us of other passages. This is Psalm 51. For you will not delight in sacrifice, or I will give it. You will not be pleased with a burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. And just as that tax collector was praying, that he was humbly praying, that here when Psalm 51 is a psalm of David, and he is saying that contrite heart, that realization that I am not so much better than everyone else, that I am in a position of needing to be humble before Lord. Y'all remember the context of this song? The context of this one is when David has had his affair with Bathsheba, that he's managed to kill her husband and to try to cover things up, and Nathan comes in there and tells him that parable. And he says, you remember that parable? There was these 2 men. One was a poor man. He had 1 lamb. That was all. He loved that lamb. And the other guy was a rich guy who had lots of things. And the rich guy, when he has a time that he needs to throw a party, needs to have a little extra something to eat, he goes and takes the lamb from the poor man, butchers it, and serves it up to his friends. And what does David do at that point? David gets so righteously indignant. He says, that makes me angry when I look at what happened. I am indignant and I am self-righteous. And what does Nathan say to him? You are the man. Thou art the man. And that makes you think, doesn't it? How many times do we need to look at that? To look at ourselves, to examine ourselves and see that. We see that over and over. That's a story that we're all familiar with. And it starts kind of like this. This is 2 Samuel 11, first verse. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. You know, that last sentence, David remained at Jerusalem. There's a whole lot in that little sentence. This is a time when kings go out to battle, and yet David remains at Jerusalem. He's not where he's supposed to be, is he? He's supposed to be with his men. He's supposed to be leading the country, not staying at home in Jerusalem. And when we think of that, one of the things Tony was saying this morning in class, he was talking about that we always look at it physically. And there is a physical part. David is physically in Jerusalem. And he is not where he is physically supposed to be. But you know what? He's not where he's supposed to be spiritually either. He is the king now, and he knows it. And he looks at other people with contempt. He looks at Bathsheba with contempt as someone that can be taken. He thinks of Uriah, who is one of the Bible lists Uriah as one of the mighty men of David. It also has Bathsheba's father, Eliam, as one of the mighty men of David. These are the men that are going off to fight for David. And he is here in Jerusalem. And he looks at contempt with all of them. He's not where he needs to be spiritually. And that's one of the things that we want to think about today. He was not where he was supposed to be physically or spiritually. And I want us to think, are we where we need to be spiritually? Because it's easy to say that we are here in this building today, and I'm so glad we are. But are where we need to be spiritually, just like David, as he took advantage of people, had people murdered, had them killed, took a serious advantage of a woman. And this is one that I always think in this passage, when we're talking about David and what he does. We know that he commits adultery with Bathsheba, that he sins to take her, that he takes advantage of her. We also know that he has Uriah killed. But this is when Joab is sending the message back to David, and he instructed the messenger, Joab does. When you have finished telling all the news about the fighting to the king, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near to the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Who killed Abimelech, the son of Jerusalem? Did not a woman cast an upper millstone on him from the wall so he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, you shall tell David, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. Now when you think of that, you see David and his righteous indignation. And Joab knows what's going to happen. When you go and you tell him that we've lost all these men, he's going to be mad. And he's going to be wanting to blame me, the general. Why did you do it this way? He's going to want to be righteously indignant at what someone else did. But you just tell him, Uriah the Hittite is dead. And that'll calm him down a little bit. But just think of the other men, not just Uriah, but the other men who went up to that wall. They gave their lives going up to that wall so that Uriah could be killed. We just don't even think about them usually. But there are people that he doesn't even think about, that he sends to their death to cover up his deceit and his problems. And it's because he is not where he needs to be spiritually. It is because he is so concerned with his position, with his power, with what he can do and what he can get over and over. You know, I told one story about testimony this week. And then this was a busy week. I was running all over the place this week. We got a lot done. That's okay. We got a lot done. But I ran into a guy, not run into him physically, but we met. And he says, Judge Messer, I need to talk to you. I said, okay. And he said, oh, I need to tell you that I lied to you. And this was a guy, I did not remember his name. There's so many people that come to my court, whether it's on juries or witnesses or grand juries or whatever it may be, that I recognized him as somebody that had been in my court. I didn't remember why, I didn't remember his name. He says, yes, I lied to you in court a few years ago, and I wanted to apologize for that. And I said, well, I appreciate you coming forward to apologize. He says, the thing was, my life was just so running out of control. I had so much going on. I was on drugs, and I was working. I had the woman I was with at that time. We were trying to do everything, and I trying to keep everything together. And it turned out I couldn't. And he ended up in prison for a while. And he says the thing about it is I didn't have time to listen to the Lord. And when he told me that, it was like I'd been reading the story about David and the story with Nathan, and it just like it hit me. And that he's talking to me. Thou art the man. That I'm in the same boat. I'm not taking drugs and doing that kind of stuff. But I was so busy. I was running so hard that I was not taking time to listen. I was not where I needed to be spiritually. I was where I needed to be physically. I was taking care of my job. But spiritually, I wasn't where I needed to be. I was not taking time to listen to God. And this guy made a point to me. And then he's turned his life around. And he's doing much better now. He's working. He's doing Bible studies. And I think he's having an impact on people. But that story of not being where you need to be. And that's one of the things that I wanted to ask us today. Are we where we need to be when David says you are the man? Are we where we need to be that we can serve the Lord? Are we where we need to be that we can listen to the Lord? Are we so caught up in our lives that we don't have time to serve? That we don't have time to listen? That we don't have time for others? And that's one of the things I wanted us to think about today. Are we where we need to be spiritually? And I'm going to tell you something. This is where I need to be spiritually. Y'all are so important to my spiritual life. I get so much encouragement. And we were talking a little bit about optimism in Bible study this morning. And a lot of my optimism comes from being with y'all. And I'm not always optimistic. I tend to be cynic. I tend to be self-righteous sometimes. I tend to be a little bit negative. But when I'm with y'all, and when I take the time to listen to the Lord, that improves. And when I am where I need to be spiritually, a lot of times that's with y'all. And I appreciate that. And I want to say that y'all are important in that regard. But in that regard, I want to ask you again, are you where you need to be spiritually? And if you're not, we want to try to help you. We want to help you take the time to listen to the Lord. If you need to be baptized, we want to take you the time to be baptized. If you just need someone to listen or someone to do something with you, we want to be here for you. And just as you are here for me, because you are, and I appreciate it. But at this time, if there's anyone who we can help, either by putting on the Lord in baptism or in any way, if you would come while we stand and as we sing.